Okay, so how do we get information to the drawings tab so we can arrange it for our customers to see? So I'll go to the plan view first. I can right click and there's a to drawing and to live drawing. So for example, I can click to drawing, and now when I go to the drawings tab, I have kitchen plan that I can pull out and resize. And you'll see that the to live drawing works very similar. It adds another scene and it has this little refresh symbol so you can see that it's a live drawing, and I can pull this out and resize it the same way. Now it's important to note that we can do this from any view inside of CAD Division, whether it's elevation, whether it's 3D, whether it's cross sections, or even inside the cabinet. All we have to do is go to the view we want, right click, and go to drawing. So there are two ways of sending drawing: to drawing and to live drawing. So you might be asking the question, well, what is the difference? Which one should I use? So the first thing I might explain is, let's do a regular static to drawing from the plan view. I'll right click and go to drawing, and I'll go ahead and pull this out on my sheet. And we'll add a new sheet, and let's put a live drawing here. Okay, so we have our static view and our live view. Okay, so what happens if I add a cabinet to the island? Like that. Let's go look at our drawings tab. The live view is updated. The static view is not. So for most of you, I'm going to recommend that you should be using live views. Because think of this, I mean, how many revisions does the average job have? 1 or 2, 5 or 6, or even more? I know it depends on the level of details in your jobs, but regardless, when you go in to do revisions, it would be silly, in my opinion, to have to recreate every drawing and do all your markup. Now, if you are creating all of your CAD, like your notes, directly on the plan, like we talked about in the adding CAD video, you at least don't have to create the notes, but it seems wasteful to have to go back through and resend them. So I'm a fan of live drawings. I know some people who do prefer the to drawing, and I think the biggest pro that I've seen for the regular to drawing is you do have full control of the drawing. So what I mean by that is I can highlight this view right here, go to CAD, and I can start cleaning up lines. Like if I don't like how something looks, I can just start trimming it out, getting rid of extra lines that I don't like. If you really want a professional drawing, I think that's the guys that are going to prefer the regular to drawing a little bit more. But again, if you're doing a lot of cleanup, why would you spend an hour or 2 hours cleaning up your drawings again if there's a revision? So that's kind of my stance on it. I would recommend live drawings so that you assemble your drawings once, and then no matter if you add a wall or add cabinets or change the layout, everything just updates seamlessly. So before we start customizing some of our templates and arranging our drawings the way we like them, let's talk about paper size. So if I right click while I'm in the drawings tab, just anywhere there's not a drawing, I can go to properties and I can choose my paper size. I would recommend choosing one size and always using that size. For example, 11 by 17 is common for customer drawings, but you can also do 8.5 by 11, so it's easy to print. It just depends on your printer and what's the easiest way for you to get it to your customers. Are you emailing it, or you got a few variables there that you need to think about. And the reason I say this before we get into our title block and stuff, there are ways to make the title block and the different scenes, I want to say smart or parametric, but you can really keep things a lot simpler if you just keep your paper the same size. So for the sake of this lesson, I'm going to be using 8.5 by 11, and I'm going to set that as my system default. I encourage you to just pause and think about what you want to use. Come into this properties, choose that and set as your system defaults before you start designing all of your title blocks and scenes and everything. Because like I said, we can make it a whole lot easier if we do this out ahead of time. Okay, now we're ready to build our title block. And if you're not sure what a title block is, basically when you look at this sheet I'm on right now, doesn't it feel like something's missing? So basically the title block is just the little outline, the little company header, maybe your logo, just some very brief information about the job. So one thing about title blocks that I want to mention first thing is this does not contain room or cabinet level details. This is job information only. So when you go to reports and plan an elevation sheet, you'll notice that you can use room details in these wall elevations template or the floor plan templates because they know what room they come from at the time they're created. Whereas when I do a title block, let me just put a sample one on here. When I do a title block, I'll use this on every sheet. If I set it as my defaults anyways. Every time a sheet is added, that's going to come on there. And so I could pull one from the kitchen and one from the bathroom here. You know, the sheet has no idea. And so that's one thing that you will have to think about with title blocks is there's no room level information on this level. There's other ways of getting room level information here, but if that is important to you, go back and watch that video about the plan and elevation sheet in the reporting section, and you just might be better off using the drawings library and edit this wall elevations to be able to include some of those room details like we talked about in that video. Okay, with that being said, let's talk about how we create our title block. So the very first thing I would suggest is right click. I'm gonna go back to sheet 1. And just to get a fresh start, I'm gonna hit clean sheet. So the very first thing I would suggest is let's go through a couple of the options. So if I right click and go to title block, we can see some of the default title blocks that they have. And the hardest thing with templates and things is you just don't really know what you want until you kind of get started. And I like some of these as like starting points, so you can kind of be like, oh yeah, I like that, or no, I don't like that. And you can see this one was designed for a bigger sheet of paper than I'm on. That's why it looks all scrunched. But you can still use this for some ideas. Same with that one. We've got just a simple title block. Okay, so for a lot of you, you might find one that's close enough to what you want, and you just want to copy it and make a couple tweaks to your company name. For the sake of this video, I'm going to create a brand new one. So let's clean the sheet. Let's go up to our drawings library, hit the drop down for title block, and we're going to create a new one. Now, before I do much of anything, I'm just going to put one piece of text on here. I'm going to go back and save it. I'm going to call it title block CE. Now I can come back in and edit this. Okay, I just like to have that saved. It makes me nervous when it says untitled. And now the very second thing I want to do before I start designing anything is I want to right click, go to paper, and make sure this is on the paper that you want it to be before you start putting lines on. So I'm going with 8.5 by 11 for this example. Okay, now how do we get started? Well, I'm just going to make a simple outline and maybe just a really thin box along the bottom. So I'm going to turn my grid on. I'm going to set it down to 1/4 inch. And again, the grid is going to be very helpful. And remember that you can change it. So when you get down on some of the finer details, put it down to 1/8 or 1/16 or whatever you need so that you can align things perfectly. So now I want approximately a 3/4 margin. I'll do 1/2 inch. I can probably squeeze that in. So now that I know my grid is 1/4 inch, I know I'm a 1/2 inch away if I go 2 blocks. And you can change the line width so you can make things really thick or really thin. Some printers struggle with 1/4 inch, so you might want to kind of use 1/2 inch as your minimum. That's pretty thin anyways. So now it's just a matter of lining out our stuff. And so here's where I'll just put Cabinet Explorer. And then, like I said, I want to do just a really small one. So we'll just kind of cap that off. Things that are good on title blocks, maybe my phone number, maybe my email. And I'm just trying to give you some examples of how you might lay it out. Now, I'm a big fan of make the important stuff bold and make the other stuff smaller. When you're editing text size, I think you'll find it's easier to work in decimals. So let's put this down to 0.15. Now here's an example of where I might want to change my grid spacing because I'd really like this to be a little bit lower. And I could take this and just move it down, but then when I go to align something else, it's not going to be perfect. So I'm going to go to properties and let's go down to 1/8 inch. Okay, now on the other side, I want to make sure I get my customer name. So I'm just going to right click and copy this and paste it over here. And here's where we're going to use our smart text. And I'm also going to align it to the right. You see how my dot is currently on the left? So if I pull something in that has longer text, it would head toward the right. Now if I highlight this and align it to the right, now it's going to head the other way. So this time I'm going to do customer, and then I want to pull in some dynamic information from the job tab. So I'm going to hit the 3 dots, go job, customer, name. And then right below that, and I don't love how my spacing is coming out. I think I'm going to drop this down here. Bear with me. I'm just going to move everything down one line. There we go. Okay, now this is going to be job dash or colon, and then I'm going to put job name. Job number is what I want. And what I would recommend is fill your job out for what you need, and then when we send a sample, you'll know if you have the right field or not. But I think job number is the main thing that we want to use whenever we're dealing with the actual job name, because it feels weird because job name seems more correct, but you'll see it's the number field that we actually want. And then another thing that I like to do, I'll go back into my edit. We'll just kind of cap this guy off right there. And let's just say, I'll just say engineer or drawn by. Now here's kind of a quick tip on if you want to put like the engineer's name or the salesperson's name. If you go into user and you go to this username, so I'm going to fill that out, and then we're going to go back and look at where that pulls from. So I'm going to put drawn by right there, and let's put this down to 0.15. And so you can see it's not difficult. You'll find it's a little time consuming, and like I said, the hardest thing that you'll find is just ideas of exactly what you want it to look like. And keep in mind, you can do images. I'm just using text here, but I can also go to insert image, and I could go choose my logo. Now, if you have a logo, make sure you drag from the corner. Do not drag from the sides because it will let you distort it. And you might have, some images might cause trouble. Like, I don't know why this one is loading in black, but let's see what happens. It's also a little bit hard to get it centered. Okay, cool. So we'll see how that does. Now, one thing that I always like to put on my title blocks is the date. So we can go to job, system date, and I would just make this really small. So just kind of right on the bottom there. And then I might copy that and do the same thing on the right side, align it to the right, and file name or file path. We'll do path. You can play with which one you like better, but what this is good for is if you happen to, say you save it as Smith job revision 1, Smith job revision 2. Not everybody saves separate actual Cabinetvision Vision job files, but if you do, you might find that useful. So let's save this, see how we did. You'll find the grid annoying once you get out of there, so you might just want to set that back to 1 inch, or possibly even turn it off while you're on the drawings page. So to select it, I'm going to go to title block and select it. And you can see it looks like my image did have some problems, which my logo here has a transparent background, so it probably didn't like that super well. So maybe I should just find one with a white background. Okay, so you can see the date is right on there, and you can see the path, exactly where my file is stored. Now, if you don't like the full path, like I said, you can, if you use just file name, you get the drawing in CV. I like that from just to make sure you know where to go back to if the customer brings the drawing back to you and says, this is the one. Okay, so customer name did not populate and drawn by did not populate. So let's go fill that in. So John Smith. If we do that from the job tab, now we have the customer name. Now, where does this drawn by? Remember we used the user? So I need to save my job and go back to the main window and go to File and Preferences. And this is a little bit tricky because some people will think, well, I looked in Preferences and I didn't see it. There's actually 3 different preference windows. The one from the main screen is different than the one while you're in a job, and the one while you're in Screen and Machine Center is different from either of those two. So keep that in mind. Now, this is where the user information comes from. And you don't have to fill this out. Like, the only thing this is really important for is if you utilize this on the drawings tab. So, rather than hard coding my phone number on the drawings, I really should use this field. That way, if I change it or if I need to list a different phone number for a different salesman, because this is a per computer setting. And so this can be really handy for, you don't have to create a title block for each person. if you link to these fields, the person can just fill out whatever they need. Notice there's nothing called username, but it's this contact field that's going to show my name. So let's fill this out with my name here, and we'll see that in the drawn by field. And then I want to replace the phone number and the email with these two smarter fields. So let's go back into our job, go to the drawings tab, and I need to change my text. Looks like I'm using the company name instead of the contact name. So let's edit our title block. I'm a big fan of just trying something and seeing what's wrong, as you'll notice. Okay, so let's erase user name and pull in user contact. There we go. And let's erase this static phone number and use user phone number. And you'll have to figure out if you want to use phone or mobile or both. Then we got user email. So hopefully that's giving you an idea kind of some of the things that you can do with title blocks. And just like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, just remember that there's no room information allowed at this level. So just keep that in mind when you get to this. And I'm actually going to take my logo off because that looks annoying. So let's just put text back in there. If you use a logo, probably just don't use one with a transparent background, but you can experiment with that and see what works. And you can change the font just like any other word editor. My suggestion would be go open like Microsoft Word or something and figure out which font you like, because on this one you have to click on it in order to see it, and you can really spend a lot of time looking for fonts if you're not careful. Okay, that will work. Clean that sheet and select our title block and save this as our system defaults. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Very simple, and I'm a little bit of a minimalist. I would probably make my text a little bit smaller, but again, you get the idea. So that is title blocks in a sense. And yeah, good luck creating your own. I hope that gives you something to play with and kind of shows you some of the things that are possible. Okay, now we're going to talk about something called drawing scenes. And I think this gets missed a lot as well. And so what a drawing scene is, let me just do 2 plan views. I'm going to right click, 2 live drawing, go over to the bathroom, which does not look like a bathroom, but that's okay, and go 2 live drawing. Now, over here on the left sidebar, I can see the difference here, kitchen plan and bathroom plan, but when I pull this out onto my drawings, how do I know the difference? Say we have 2 very similar rooms, I need to know, is it just up to me to get CAD here and do, bathroom 1? Or do I have to do it from the room level? How do I do it? If I put it right on the plan view, sure, it would show up. So there's a couple options. You could manually label it, and I know some people do manually label it, but what I'm going to show you is what I think is a good fit for a lot of people. Okay, so we're going to be setting up something called a drawing scene. Let me just take these off for a little bit. I'm actually going to clear these out. So there are not any example drawing scenes created, so we need to create one. So I'm going to go to Drawings Library, go over to Drawing Scenes, and I always want to click this group thing, but it's actually the New button at the bottom. And I'm going to turn my grid on and just put on, 1/8 inch is fine. So I'll start by aligning it to the left. So I'm going to use my Smart Text, and scene name is an option here. Remember how I said that depending on what template you're editing, you'll have different options here. So scene name is only visible here. And then let's say we want to downsize that a little bit. And maybe we want to draw a line and make it just a little thicker. And again, I'm just putting out a template together here so you can see. And if you do scale drawings, probably not a bad idea to put the scale on this little scene template as well. That'll be enough some people like to put the little architectural symbols with the wall name and stuff, and you can certainly do that, but I'm just going to do a simple one for now. So I'm going to call this CE. Okay, now let's see how this works. So first thing, if I send my drawing to live drawing again, and if I go to drawings, well, it's not there yet. How do I activate it? So the first way, the more manual way, is you go to properties and enable the template. And that looks nice. Now, some people like to center it too. And actually I do a lot. I'm not sure why I aligned it left that time, but it's up to you. On elevations, I like it aligned left, but on plans, I like it aligned to the center. But you can play with whatever works for you. Now, the cool thing is, you can go to properties and you can name this whatever you like. You have some flexibility there with the customization. You can also go to properties and change the scale to 1/2 inch or whatever you need it to be, which is a little too big. I'm using 8.5 by 11, so my scale has to stay pretty small. So you see the idea, and again, you don't want to put a whole lot of information here, but there's some quick little things here that you can do to make this happen. But I don't want to have to select this every time. That's almost as bad as putting CAD text manually in the room level. So let's do that. Let's clear this out. I'm going to go back to the plan view. I'm going to go to my layers. I'm going to edit and go to advanced and enable my template right here. And there's some weird things with sometimes you enable it and you come back like a little bit later and it's not enabled. So just keep an eye on this right after you click it. Once it sticks, you'll be fine, but it seems like it can have trouble every now and then, but exactly like that. No idea why, but let's enable it. And this time we'll send to live drawing. And now when we pull it out, it's automatically on there. So this makes things go so much faster. And even elevation views. Let's quickly do to live drawing. Go to the next wall. To live drawing. To live drawing. And now I can just start adding sheets. Excellent point here. So why did that not come through? Well, if you remember on my plan view, I had it checked, but I didn't do it on the elevation view. So let me delete these 3. And you're seeing me forget all the details as I go through this, so bear with me, but it's probably good training anyways. All right, so from the elevation view, just like I did on the plan view, I'm gonna go to layers, advanced, and check this to true. And now I can send to live drawing. So I'm just gonna put all 3 of these just so we get a nice example. And then let's start pulling them out. And so this is why I like the drawings tab, because you can put multiple drawings on a page. If you're using 8.5 by 11, arguably you probably would just put 1 per page anyways. But when you get into that bigger paper, you can start sectioning things off in grids and compiling things together. Now you will notice that my line is a little strange right here. So if we go back to drawings library and go to my drawing scenes, what we're seeing there is the points are locked. And this is their attempt. Remember a few videos ago, I talked about the paper size. And this is their attempt to make these things work with multiple sizes of paper and multiple sizes of rooms. So I would probably just turn off this second point. It's okay if it locks to the left, but I really don't, because you notice how on that really narrow one, like it was just half the distance. So either turn them both off and like let them float, or rather than locking it to the center like this diagram shows, let's lock it all the way to the other side and let's see what that does. So let's go into our template and take a look at why this line is stopping so short. And just a note here before we go in, it has to do with the width of the scene that comes out. So there is a little strategy here behind what you want to do here. So if we go to drawings library and we click on these, you'll see these little points are locked. These are called constraints, or actually to be more specific, they're called simple constraints. So this is how they kind of make things hold their position or stretch accordingly as the scene changes. So our text, the little dot here is held to the left side. That's what that little arrow means. And it's held at the bottom of the scene, which is good. So the text is fine. Now the line, the very first point, this guy over here on the left, is held exactly like the text, but the right line is held a certain distance from the center and from the bottom. So that can be okay. If I know that, I would probably put it exactly at half, or maybe even a little bit more full. That way it at least comes to there. But what happens if I just want it to float? So you'll notice that if I don't want to pick points here, I can't just turn off the constraints on one dot, because this thing will just kind of land anywhere. Yeah, exactly like that. Now, I do have the ability to kind of turn off the points on all of them and just kind of let the whole thing float. But if I'm trying to align it to the left, I don't really want to do that. So my recommendation would be find something that works decently And you might have to kind of find a middle ground between like, okay, what does it like a more full wall look like? And then what does a short wall look like? And as long as you kind of make it come out proportionally, just find, like I said, find a middle ground. So you might decide that I would rather my line be really long rather than too short. And that's okay. So there's kind of a balance there. Like personally, I would rather see it at least clear the text. So that's something you can play with. Yeah, just keep an eye on the in your layer settings. For whatever reason, I haven't figured out the reason why, but sometimes that just likes to come unchecked. So you just keep an eye on that because you want to make sure that it's setting the template for you as you're sending it to drawings. And the other thing I might add, like I said, I like a centered drawing on my plans. If you want to use the same one on all of them, totally fine. But just know that you can create a separate scene for plans than you have for elevations if you need any specific details on elevations versus on plans. So hopefully that gives you some ideas to work with. Yeah, you can customize it to fit what you want to see on your drawing. So a couple of videos ago when we were making the title block template, I made the statement that you can't put room level information on the title block. And so some of you might be wondering, well, what if I want to show my construction name, my material schedule, my door style? Where should I put that? So in this video, we're going to talk about a few of the ways that we're able to do that. And just like with a lot of things in Cabinet Vision, there are a lot of different angles we can come from to accomplish this. So let's take a look. The first thing I'm going to show is what I'm going to call the simple method. It's not necessarily automated, but it's the simplest and the easiest and the most flexible. So back at the plan view, I'm going to go to CAD and I'm going to grab a text box and draw a box somewhere where it fits in the room. So I might say kitchen perimeter, painted white dove, island, walnut, and then whatever stain color. And you can put some random other information, countertop, by others, pools, by others. You have total flexibility because you're typing it. So this is option 1. And obviously we can make this, whatever size we need, and we can make this come out however we need to. And if we're using live drawings, that information is just right on there. Okay, so that's option 1, and by far the easiest and the less to think about up front. Now, for those of you who are saying, I do not want to type that on every single room, I get it, that's fine. Let's look at a slightly alternative version to this, but still similar. So back in this view, I'm going to go to CAD and I'm going to delete my little text box. And this time I'm going to put some smart text here. So I'm going to say room, and I'm going to use the smart text here. For whatever reason, there it is, room name. Okay, so we got room name, and I'm going to actually turn my grid on just so I can see this a little better. Maybe not quite that small. Okay, so what I'm about to do here is I'm going to build a little table of sorts that has just some dynamic text that I can just drop in one click. So just bear with me while I build out just a few things so you can kind of see where I'm headed. So now let's do construction. And again, I go to my little smart text box, go to properties, assembly, and construction. Cool. You see how that automatically comes in. It's pulling the room name and my construction name. So if you don't like the way your construction is named, you can always go back and rename it to be more of a friendly construction name. Okay, now let's keep moving. Let's do and this gets a little tricky because technically they separate base and upper because it is separated in the room settings. Now, more often than not, it's probably the same. So you could just kind of assume that it's the same and just call it materials. If you're worried about potentially having a different base and upper, I would just create base materials and upper materials. Easy enough. You have 2 settings, just make 2 lines. For most of us, I'd say it's probably most often the same. You can probably get by with doing this. And then we have, and you can kind of get the idea where I'm going, and you can see all the fields that we have available. So doors are similar. Are we going to make a line for base, upper, and tall, or are we pretty much sure that it's always going to be the same? So I'm just going to do base door style and call that my standard. And I can put the profiles and I can put all these other things. Now, what I can do is And I could obviously build out much more. I could put a little box around it and maybe even put lines between it. You know, I can do some things to make this look a little nicer. So let me just format this just a tick. So now what I want to do is I want to save this as a symbol. A symbol is a reusable object. So I'm going to highlight this, right click on it, and save symbol. And I'm going to create a new folder. And I'm just going to call it, you know what, I'm just going to give it my own name. If you have groups of symbols that you find out you're going to be saving later on, you can name it whatever you want. And then I'm going to call this plan room details. Okay, now the beauty of this is if I delete this object, so you have your guys putting the job together, getting all the details around, and then right before, or even after they send the drawings, if you're doing live drawings, all they have to do is go to CAD, insert symbol, and pull out the plan details. Whoops, didn't mean to put 2. And then you could go over to the bathroom, insert symbol, and pull this out. And so, again, it's kind of like option 1, but it's a little bit faster. Now, what's the downsides to this? Well, if you remember, on the first step, I had said perimeter was painted and the island was walnut stained. So that's the limitations of a more automated approach like this. So obviously we can only have one thing chosen in our room, and I don't want to put the island in a different room because I want the presentation to be the same. So if you go this approach with the symbol, just know that you might also have to add on and say island is. But our goal with anything is let's make this as automated for as much as possible, even if we can only get to 90 or 95%, because you don't want to commit to all manual because it won't work on one job out of 20. That's option 2, is utilizing a symbol and then just making notes as needed. Option 3, sort of similar to pulling in the symbol. On the last video, we made our drawing scene. So let's go back into Drawings Library and edit our scene. Turn our grid on. I'll just copy the scale. And I'm just going to do 1 here just so you can see, because hopefully you're getting a good idea of what all is available. Now, if you'll notice here, I don't have room details. I do have job, and I can get to assembly construction. And I know that all I have to do is erase this and type room, and I can actually pull in the room construction. And just to prove that, let's see if we can change the bathroom and get a little different view there. Let me go send the bathroom. You see it's on face frame. So let's send this to live drawing and create a new sheet. And my template is turned off. Let's get rid of my symbol. Okay, so my scale is weird, but you can see how the bathroom is pulling in face frame and the kitchen is pulling in frameless. So technically you could build that little table. I'm going to call it a table, kind of like what we built here with our symbol. You could build that right into the drawing scene, and then you can even save another whole step of dragging it out onto your plan. Now, the cons of that are you have a little less control. Like with the manual symbol, you can kind of put it there in the gap. Whereas here, it's always going to take up more room in a very consistent place. So that is 3 of our options. And like I said, there's probably even more ways to do it. But hopefully this gives you an idea. You can kind of rewatch this video a couple times, kind of figure out what is going to work best for you. And one other thing I'm going to note is if you decide to build a symbol or put it into your drawing scene or whatever you decide to do, you might find that you'd like to put something on about the countertops or the hardware, but you don't really have a good way to do it. Because there's not really, maybe you want to see on here countertops by others or by us, essentially. Or maybe you just want to be able to type in what pulls and what knobs go on it. I can only pull information that I have here. So what if I just want to put, let's just do countertops and pools, just provider. Is it by us or is it by a third party? So what I'm going to show you is an option to be able to do that. So let's go back out of this job. And I'm going to just go to Utilities and Parameters. And we're going to learn a whole lot more about parameters in the Object Intelligence and UCS section. So I'm not going to be super thorough when I'm explaining this, but I'm going to do enough just so you can build your drawing scenes. So from the main screen of Cabinet Vision, we can go to Parameters,
And let's just make this window a little bigger. And there's a few things we have to fill out. So what I'm gonna do is, this is going to show on the sidebar. And this is something you're gonna be able to type in or choose from the sidebar. Because the sidebar sorts alphabetically, I'm a little bit careful with how I name things. So what I would do is start with a consistent word, whether it's plan or drawings, or because we might end up having 5 or 6 different things that all pertain to this title block setting, or these room details. Let's just do, I'm gonna call it drawings. And then I'm gonna ask countertop. The first column is called prompt. This is what we'll see on the sidebar. And again, this sorts alphabetically. So if I want it in a specific order, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll put 0, 1, and then a parenthesis. And that helps me control, because otherwise, when I would come down here to do drawings.pools, it's up to what it starts with to be, the letters is what determines the sort order. And I don't love that, especially if I have a question that's like related. So for example, let's do pool provider, and then let's do pool info. Okay, so this is a good example. So if I did this, pool info would come before pool provider because I is higher in sort order than P. And so this is why I will use the numbers, and I like to put 0, 2, otherwise I'm limited to 9 options here. So just start with a consistent word and keep it short, keep it very brief. It's just like, think of like a category, and then do your numbering system second. So high level category first, numbering system with parentheses to just kind of close it off visually. And then just a very quick, in the form of a question, what are we talking about with this parameter? I'm probably covering too many details right now, but I do want to show this because it very much pertains to our room details and title blocks and customer drawings and everything. Now we have to give it a name. So this is just a hidden name. Nobody's ever going to see this. I like to use my initials. Like I use Cabinet Explorer. You can use your company name or your own initials. And it helps me just sort and see who made the parameter. And then my typical way is just put an underscore right after that. And then I'm going to do drawings countertop. So in a very similar fashion, and again, try to be as consistent as possible, because even in the parameter names, it's nice if all the drawings things group together. So don't just come up with, it's made up names, but try to be as consistent as possible. So when you're going to look for these, you can easily find them in alphabetical order. Okay, now I want these to be at the room level. And I want them to be an attribute. A note is kind of tucked away in the room details. An attribute is showing on the sidebar. And I want to do a couple different things here. These are all going to be text. And the pool info is just going to be straight up text. You can type in whatever you want. I'm just going to say not selected here. That's what it's going to default to. But then on these, I don't want to just type in here. I want to have a drop down. So again, this gets high level very quickly, but I want to show you this so you know how to do a drop down on the sidebar. So I'm going to say by Cabinet Explorer. Obviously you put your own company name, and then you put a pipe. Nope, I'm sorry. The pipe comes later. So we put our first option by Cabinet Explorer, and then you have to assign a value. So I want the value to be the same as the first option is prompt, and then you assign a value. So by Cabinet Explorer equals by Cabinet Explorer. It's going to have the same value as the prompt. And then we put a pipe, which if you hold shift and hit the little slash right above enter, you can get that pipe. And then we can do by others, and that's going to be equal to by others. All right, now that, again, I hate to go this deep right now, but I think it's necessary. Now I'm going to do the same thing on pool providers, by Cabinet Explorer, by others. So with that being said, that's a taste of the room parameters. Let's go see what we actually did now. Let's go back into our job. And just like we've done in the past, we don't see anything yet. So we need to go to update. And all we really need to update is parameters, but I'm just going to update everything because it's good practice. And now we see some sidebar attributes coming across the top. So we got our countertop, our pool provider, and our pool info. And you can see it's numbered perfectly 1, 2, 3. So I could maybe say 1, 2, 3 on doors, and 2, 3, 4, 5 on drawers. Putting some general information, and then I'm going to say this is by Cabinet Explorer and the countertop is by others. So this gives your designers and your salespeople just some quick triggers, which right now is going nowhere, but here in just a little bit, I'm going to show you where we can put that. Remember we made that little symbol? So just very much the same, I can do this. I can say countertop provider. I'll just say countertops. And this time, it's not going to be in the auto select. So what I have to do is I have to remember what I named this. I also have to tell it where to look. Well, I'm at the room level, and you can see as you look through some of my recents, you can see how those are formatted. Room.name, room.base schedule, room.construction. So I'm going to do room dot, and then remember that parameter name we gave it. It's a good idea to copy it to your clipboard like I did there so you can paste it in here. And then we can see how now we have this handy little thing that we can make smart. So let me just quickly put the rest of these in. Is it pools maybe? So if I missed, you're going to see it does that. Maybe it's just pool. All right, I forget what I named it, so I'm gonna just go to my object tree, click on room, and pool info. Ah, clever. I'll copy that and paste this in between the curly brackets. So with that, I know that was a lot of detail to cover, but with that, you can see how even if there's not necessarily an option in the room, you can give your designers and your salespeople just some quick toggles that they can pick at the room level. It's always going to remember that, and it can be changed at any time. And so at any point, you can be updating all these different templates, whether it's drawing scenes or symbols, or there's a lot of flexibility if you need fields that aren't necessarily provided. So hopefully that kind of opens your eyes to some of the things that are possible. And yeah, just know we're going to be covering parameters and system parameters and getting into the object tree, and we're going to be diving a whole lot deeper into that later on in the course here. So you can be looking forward to that.